What you're about to hear is the Fender Mustang GT-100 loaded with the latest firmware as of shooting this video with a backing track. I haven't done anything to the audio except for panning the rhythm tracks left and right. Let's take a listen. So you might be asking how or why did I get another Fender Mustang GT amplifier if I was dissatisfied with the original one? I bought one at the release date when they first came out, and I had one huge criticism which made me get rid of it. It didn't sound very 3D. Now that term might not make a whole lot of sense to people, but basically imagine you're in a room and there's a hi-fi system playing a guitar track, and then you've actually got an amplifier in the room playing that same guitar track. It's going to sound completely different. One's kind of a very shallow sense of sound. The guitar amp would sort of be chopping your head off. The original release of these amplifiers didn't have that three-dimensional vibe. Going into this video, I've got no expectations of this particular amplifier, and I say that in a good way. I was a huge fan of the version 2 Mustangs. I made over 40 patches that were downloaded over 400,000 times. So thank you for everybody who's downloaded the patches either from the Fuse site or from my website as well. It's had so many hits, and it was great to be able to contribute to that community. It all kind of ended when I got my hands on the initial release of the GT-200. I was never really that satisfied with the sound. It had a very two-dimensional feel to it, as opposed to the 3D sound I was used to out of any of my other amps. Out of the blue, about 3 weeks ago, I got an email from Fender, which was nice of them, saying, hey, we want to send you a Fender Mustang GT-100 with the latest firmware so you can see what you think. I was like, you know what? I'll give it another shot. I love the old generation of these amps, and I really wanted to love these ones. So I want to find out whether or not the sound of this particular amplifier is better or improved since its first release. And I can tell you up front it is. I'm going to save my full critique of the amplifier till the end of the video, but just know when you hear the term 3D or 2D in the video, the 3D has more projection and it's louder and it sounds like something you could take to a small gig, as opposed to that 2D sound, which is probably fine for home use and home recording and that kind of stuff, but just doesn't have that knock of a real amplifier sitting in the room. So I hope that explains it. If this video is helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. I should also point out too, Fender are letting me keep this amp. They haven't paid me for the video. They're not paying me for my opinion or anything like that. They just sort of gave me the amp and said, make a video, see what you think about it. So that's what I'm going to do. I'll give you my full review at the end of this video as well. So stay tuned for that. Let's do it. Now, if you've just purchased one of these amplifiers, or if you find it a little bit bright, I'm going to give you a tip that definitely works wonders. So click the menu button and then go down to EQ and amp settings. Go to global EQ, which is the first one, and then go to bright cut. If you're already on flat EQ, just scroll left and then click the button down, and then you're saved on bright cut. This will make the amp sound way, way better. Alright, let's get into it. Like I mentioned at the start, I'm not going to go through any of the stock presets. These kind of amps shine once you start actually getting in there and making your own patches. Even with the older version 2 Mustangs, a lot of the stock presets kind of sucked. So the beauty of these amps is you can start from scratch and make something that's unique to you. Try to get the sound that's in your head. So for me personally, I started with this dirty patch because this is the sound that's very familiar to me, and this is the kind of sound that I try to get through any of my other amps, irrespective of what it is. So this is a nice simple patch. It's basically a Fender Twin, a tube screamer with some reverb obviously in the amp and some delay. So let's take a listen. This is bridge pickup. The The thing I really dig about the Twin is the fact that it already has that 3D sound. Adding the tube screamer just sort of makes it all nice and squishy. Let's go over to neck pickup now as well. Let's try this. Volume down. So that already sounds pretty sweet. I would just leave it like that and not have the foot switch or anything. Just play with the volume control. You do lose a little bit of top end, especially once you start turning down, but you know, it's not too bad. This next one I made is nice and simple as well. You'll probably notice a pattern with this particular video. It's a deluxe reverb with a clon. Nice and simple. Here we go. This is how it sounds. Now, for those who don't know what a clon does, it's a sort of nasally sounding and very sort of bright sounding overdrive pedal. Kind of enhances the tops, brings in a little bit of this upper mid-range bump as well. So it can sound a little bit odd on its own, but in the mix, a clon's a really great pedal. Let's go over to bridge. Volume control down. So this one maintains its clarity. We'll go over to neck. Cool. This next one you also heard in the intro clip. This is my take on the bass breaker. So the stock bass breaker preset, or whatever it was called, wasn't the best. It was a bit fizzy, way too toppy, at least for my particular setup. So this is why you actually make your own. You can kind of tailor the amplifier to suit the guitars that you're playing, or make a patch for a specific guitar. If you're playing a dark sounding guitar, then you go over to a Strat, you use one of the stock presets, it's going to be all over the place. So let's give this a shot. This is bridge pickup. I should have also mentioned too, I'm on the medium gain setting, so that's my favorite on the actual amp. So to my ear, there's no ice pick in the room. You're hearing this just with the mic straight in front of the amp, so hopefully it sounds as good on the video as it does in the room right here. This particular amplifier model as well isn't as loud as some of the others, so I sort of had to crank the amp up to almost 11 o'clock on the master volume, just to put it into some sort of context. The other ones that I've made so far, I've had it at about 9 or 10 o'clock, so I really had to turn it up a bit to get the same sort of volume out of it. I'll just crank it up one more time. Here we go. Cool. Up next we have one I designed more for fun than anything else. This isn't a sound that I would go and use for my particular type of music, but recently I shared one of my favorite songs on my feed. If you're a subscriber, you probably saw it. Now there's a couple of different guitar parts, but this is kind of like emulation of one of the parts at the start. So here we go. It's neck. And that's another simple one as well. So essentially all I've got on this one is the boogie and a large haul. Nice and simple, and what can I tell you, it just works. That's a much brighter sound that I would traditionally go for as well, but it works for what we're doing today. Let's go over to some of the clean tones that I've made as well. This particular one is nice and simple. It's the twin, again, because it works well. I've got some 65 spring reverb and a little bit of delay. Let's take a listen. Bridge and middle. It's a pretty nice sound. Let's go over to neck. Now, while I think that sounds pretty sweet, one thing I noticed is when I went over to neck pickup there at the end, I noticed that the low end response changed on the amp. It sort of got a little bit flubby sounding, meaning like non-defined. And when I went back to, or if I go back to bridge and middle, you're going to hear it sort of clean up. Back to neck. Yeah, it's an interesting sort of thing that I should probably just turn the bass down a little more. Let's try this. Go back to neck. Well, there you go. So depending on how loud you have the amplifier, the bass response is going to probably sound quite a bit different. Cool. Another one of the stronger amp sims on this particular amp is the clean boogie setting. This one sort of has a bit of a different vibe to it than the Fender. Obviously, it's a little honkier sounding, but it kind of works. Let's give this a shot. This is neck and middle. It's got that kind of pokey sound, which generally works pretty well in the context of a live mix. Let's give this a shot now on neck and middle. Sweet. All right, up next, we're going to take a look at a higher gain one I made, which is based on the Friedman. The only thing I've got on here is some small plate reverb. So nice and simple. Again, one thing I did notice is this has got a whole lot of dirt, but it also loses that 3D attack. I've got the amp cranked for this one as well, and it doesn't sound as loud in the room. It's that hi-fi kind of sound. It's usable and it's fun, but it's one of those things if you at all plan on taking this out or jamming with friends, might not be the best sort of sound for jamming with someone else. You'll know what I mean if you play live. There's certain things that sound fine at home, but when you get it out live, it doesn't always work so well. So let's give this a shot. This is bridge pickup. It sounds fine, and it probably will record better than it sounds in the room. But yeah, if I was to go back to say something like I was on before, you're going to hear a huge difference when it comes to the tone. So I'll go back to the clean twin with the tube screamer. Have a listen to the difference. So it's not even close. At the same volume settings on both of the patches and all that kind of stuff, this one sounds like you'd hear it right down the back of the room, whereas the other one sounds like you'd kind of hear it if you were standing behind the amp. It's a hard thing to explain. Now, I know people spoke about the phasing issues originally with these amps as well as what I did as well. I kind of felt like some of the sounds felt like they were coming out of the back of the amp, or it's the best way I could describe it. But yeah, this one feels like it throws forwards. The other one feels like it doesn't throw forwards. One sounds like a recording, one sort of sounds like an amp. That's another way you could look at it, like a hi-fi amplifier versus, say, an actual guitar amplifier. But the twin with the tube screamer sounds huge. Let's take another listen. And then I'll go back to my other patch. Let's take a listen. It's lost all of the attack on the note. It's lost the speaker throw, all that kind of stuff that would work great, not only for recording too, but also when you play live, or if you're jamming, or if you have this amp mic'd up. That's, to me, is not a sound that's going to work typically very well. So going back to one that I've made based off either the Fender amp ones always seem to sound best in these amps, and there's a reason why too. But yeah, the Bass Breaker one too sounds a little more 3D to my ear than the Boogie one does. I'm just going to crank that up a little more. Yeah, it's not even close. To my ear, the Fender ones are definitely where it's at, and just stacking an overdrive, one overdrive possibly, maybe two, depending on how you want to run it and what your sound is in your head. But less is more when it comes to this amp. Don't get stuck with the option paralysis stuff. Find a simple sound that works and just use your guitar to get the sounds that you require out of it, or chuck a wire pedal in front of it or something like that. But if you're straight up blues guy, you probably don't need a lot of these kind of effects. But for me, a lot of the amps will never get used for the kind of stuff that I like. But the good thing is, I'm glad that they've kind of fixed that 3D punch kind of sound, at least with the Fender amp models. It felt like all of them lacked that in the past. So something has been changed, and it feels like just with basically like the twin or the deluxe with an effect, it has a bit more throw than it used to. So that's pretty cool. Thanks for watching, guys. My name's Shane. If you have any comments or questions, leave them below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. So I should probably start with, how did I approach this part of the video, meaning the end? I've actually shot it a couple of times because I realized I wasn't looking at it from everybody's perspective. And now a lot of people will buy this amp if they're beginners, intermediate guitarists, people who want to just play at home, people that might go to a jam night, that kind of thing. I used to love my 3 and 4 Mustang version 2s. I used to take them to gigs, I used to record with them in jam nights and all that kind of stuff. So they were an extremely versatile amp. Like I mentioned at the start, when I first got my hands on one of these, I wasn't impressed and it felt like a step backwards. But I gotta tell you, so many of the sounds in here now sound way more 3D. And I think the strength of this particular amplifier is making your own presets. Don't just use the stock ones. Sure, you can get an idea of how some of them are set up and then you can tweak them and resave them, but I really think the strength of this amplifier is the clean tones, the Fender clean tones. The Fender drive tones are really good. A lot of the effects pedals and delays and all that kind of stuff you can add are great as well. So this should appeal to just about everybody. Is this loud enough for a small gig? And does it have the right kind of vibe for a small gig? Absolutely, and I would never have said that before. So whatever they've done, they've made the projection of sound just so much more realistic on this particular amp now than they have before. I'm not just saying that. If it was crap, I'd let you know. There's also a whole handful of presets that I don't feel have that kind of, actual amplifier sound, but they're fun. So for people at home that just want to jam and get like a particular type of dirty sound, or some sort of different clean tone that might not be a Fender amp, sure, you can get different kinds of tones, but they just don't seem to have the knock or that big push of sound like some of the Fender models. So my suggestion would be probably keep it as simple as you can. Get a Fender twin, put a pedal on it and a delay or whatever, and then you're done. And it should sound pretty huge. So the part you're listening to right now was shot a day after I had already filmed the outro. And I put, just earlier today, the Mustang up against my Studio Pro 112 and it killed it. The tone I had dialed in on the Mustang GT, it sounded bigger, it sounded louder, it's just sounded better. And I'm shocked. I never thought I'd say that. I remember when I first tested the PV Bandit up against the GT-200, the PV Bandit left it for dead. So This is a really lightweight, loud little amp that's really small gig capable now, which I think is fantastic. There are a few things I wish they had have kept from the prior generation, but these are things that can't be changed now. I really miss the hardware keys on top of the amplifier so you could turn the stomp boxes on and off and all that kind of stuff. I hope maybe on the next iteration of these amps, if they make another series, they put the hardware keys back on, and I wish they just included at least a 2-button foot switch with it as well. It's just something you have to buy as an addition. I really think these type of amps kind of need the foot switch because there's no other way of getting around the amp. But for me personally, this is how I'm going to run it. I'm going to take it to a jam and record it live, and hopefully it works fine, and I'll share that video with you as well as also comparing it to some other amplifiers. But the way that I'm just going to run this is what you heard in the video. I'm going to set the twin up with a tube screamer and some delay, use the volume control on my guitar to turn up and down, and that's it. I'm not going to get in the habit of tweaking everything. If I need more treble, less bass, or more mids, I can walk over to the amp like a conventional amplifier and use it in that scenario. So for me, a guy that plays live, I could definitely get some use out of it. Like I mentioned earlier, I try to look at this from everybody's experience, whether you're a beginner, an intermediate player, someone who goes to jams and all that kind of stuff. So I didn't want to just isolate one type of group of users. If this is your first amplifier, you'll definitely be able to get some great tones. The new firmware has done marvelous things to it, actually. I'm pretty shocked I'm saying this. So yeah, I was pretty hard on the original release of these amplifiers, but looking at it from a different perspective now, looking at it as a tool you can just jam with at home, maybe take it to a jam, all that kind of stuff, and not maybe having high expectations for it, I'm really pleasantly surprised. So I'll try and get some live footage of this amp in the mix in a band, and we'll see how it sorts itself out like that as well. Also, my friend Dr. Rick has the GT-200, so we might load up that firmware, maybe take him out and have a play, and we'll see how it sounds. But I'm going to do some comparisons with my Studio Pro. I'll do some follow-up videos about how I dial in my sounds, all that kind of stuff. That's a request I've had for so long, and I never did it, so it'll be coming up with this particular amplifier. And even if you've got the older generation, the version 2s, it's still going to be the same process. So overall, the interface on the amp was fine. I didn't even read the instructions. I just cycled through and I found the sounds that I liked, and I kept it simple. And I think simple worked best with my particular type of sound. So let me know what you think of Fender actually sending this out and asking us for honest feedback. There is only one other thing that I noticed with the amplifier too. At certain volumes, there's a bit of cabinet rattle. You can kind of hear that on the video a little bit from time to time. It's nothing massive, and in the context of, you know, if you're jamming with a friend, you're never going to hear that. But just in an isolated recording environment, just even with a 57, I could still kind of hear the cabinet rattle. So if you're hearing some noise on the recording, that's what that was. I may actually replace the speaker in this and try it with another speaker as well. I think that might be a bit of a fun test. So thanks again for watching, guys. My name's Shane. If this video was helpful, give it a thumbs up. If not, let me know why, and I will catch you soon. Thanks, guys. See ya.